Welcome to my fellow Montanans. I am Dr. Kyle Austin, owner of Farm 406, and it is a great Sunday evening right here in the state of Montana. Thank you for joining us for our 7 o'clock Sunday show on My Fellow Montanans. Fall is among us, and you're seeing the trees out there changing colors. It's a beautiful time in the state of Montana, cooler temperatures, and we're going to see some snow soon. But right around the corner here is Halloween on the 31st. Then the following morning on November 1st, Saturday morning, we have the big Montana Lottery Millionaire, the Montana Millionaire Lottery. Then on November 2nd, the day after, it's time to change those clocks back. Yep, it's fall back, so change those clocks back 1 hour on Sunday, November 2nd. So on today's show, we got a great wide variety of topics to talk about here at Farm 406 Studios. But, one of the things being a Montana farmer from the Highline, and I'm a pharmacist in Billings, Montana. But what really, really made me laugh this last week was Troy Downing. Troy Downing's a joke. He's our United States congressman that you elected. But this was in the news, him and 8 other Congress people sent a letter to President Donald Trump about importing beef from Argentina. Now, the United States, we've been importing beef from Mexico, Canada, Argentina, you name it. It's nothing new. It's been an ongoing battle of why we want country of origin labeling, why we want, the whole eat beef campaign. But this is no different than Montanans saying we should stop importing Californians as our elected officials, right, Troy Downing? Because you didn't like California, so you jumped the border to get elected in the state of Montana. So it's no different than the cattle coming from Argentina where you're going on to someone else's turf. But Troy Downing makes the argument in this letter that the reason that President Donald Trump should not allow Argentina beef is because he has concerns about the quality and the safety of that beef. Now, folks, all of you out there that are beef eaters, you know that beef is probably, well, it's not as good as Montana beef and it's not as good as American beef, but there's not going to be anything wrong with the quality and safety of the beef because you know 2 things. One, if you cook your meat, it will kill everything out there. So you can eat whatever you want as long as you cook it, right? But if it tastes like garbage, you're going to throw that beef up. You're going to have diarrhea. And now you have issues there. But for him to actually come up with this garbage statement about the quality and the safety of the beef is an invalid argument. If he's going to tell President Donald Trump, look, we need to stop importing Argentina beef or any beef, we should just boycott all beef. Why import anything that we do a great job with in Montana in the United States? Just tell them no. We're not going to stand behind you if you import any beef. Because their beef is quality, folks. You can't bash the cattle ranchers down there in Argentina. It's just like, look, folks, we don't need your beef. So anyway, why Montana should be asking, the same thing about our government. If you're gonna Troy Downing, if you're worried about the quality of beef, then Montana should be worried about the quality of our United States congressman because you are no better than that imported beef. You're imported from the state of California. And you're not doing a great job for Montanans down there because if you're really going to be fighting for the ranchers here in the state of Montana, you're not going to join a lousy 7 other people to write a lousy letter to President Donald Trump, basically tell him, complaining about quality of beef. Now, President Donald Trump said that he planned on importing beef from Argentina because it would help lower costs. Now, do you really think importing beef from Argentina will lower the cost of beef in the United States? I mean, it will affect competition. It will put ranchers out of business. But do you think beef is really expensive these days? I mean, think about it. I pay roughly. I go to a local rancher in the state of Montana, and this is how Mr. Austin buys his beef. He goes to a rancher. He asks that rancher to raise a steer and marble it. And they can use different grains for marbling that beef and how long they marble and et cetera, et cetera. But then you take it to a local butcher. And yeah, I usually end up about $3 per pound cut and wrap. Okay, give or take maybe 50 cents. I've had some ranchers out there that cut me a deal and I got about $2.50 cut and wrap, and then some other ones about 3.50 cut and wrap. But still, folks, you're getting fresh, quality, and local. It is so much better than going to the grocery store, because at the grocery store, like if you go to that like Albertsons, what they do is they grind up your beef. They add some artificial dye to give it that yellow, or not yellow. It could be yellow after it sat there for a few days, but that bright red coloring is artificial coloring. And Robert Kennedy is probably, he's against those artificial dyes, and so you're probably getting cancer buying that beef from Albertsons down there. But then what is the other thing that these second-rate grocery stores are doing to your beef? They're adding a lot of water to it. They're fluffing it up with water. So when you walk up to that packaging, you got the artificial dye making it look all nice and pretty and red, like it's fresh, but it's probably 2 weeks old. And then they add water to it when it goes through the grinder to give it that fluffiness look. That's not good beef, folks. That's garbage. And then so when you go cook it up, you see two things. You see it shrink. And so your 2 pounds of burger becomes 1 pound of burger. It has no quality to it. Your pan is full of water, and then you have a bunch of grease that you're also trying to get rid of as well because it's full of fat. So when you're out shopping for beef, there's a lot of places around Montana you can go right and get ranch fed beef for an affordable price. So Donald Trump, I don't like your argument there that you need to bring in Argentina beef to help lower the cost of ranchers. So is this we always got to get into the government ridiculousness right on the show, because the president wants to use importing beef to lower local beef prices, right? Folks, this is your president. You elected President Donald Trump because he was going to do all these great things for the working person, all the businesses out there, for all the taxpayers, all the farmers, all the ranchers. But yet here he is actually wanting to bring in beef. Now that kind of goes against his agenda for putting tariffs out there to prevent imports, right? A little bit of flip-flopping there. But what is the real reason? Is it because maybe people don't want to work in the United States and so ranchers are falling behind? I don't think so. I think we got plenty of cattle out there and plenty of cattle ranchers. President Donald Trump did kind of hurt the workforce, chasing away the illegals, but or the seasonal workers. A lot of seasonal workers come into Montana to even help with the ranchers. But he kind of put a squash to that. So a lot of those individuals aren't coming into our state. What the real caveat here is to what President Donald Trump and the wealthy people are trying to do. Folks, they want your land. They don't want to see cattle. They don't want to smell cattle poo. What they want is your land, because the wealthy people in the United States, they want to buy up your land and not have to worry about the cattle. They can make more money subdividing your ranch land and growing the population of the United States. Think about that. And that's maybe what he's thinking. Maybe he's thinking, oh, well, we got to get rid of some cattle. But maybe the population growth in the United States is outdoing the ranchers, and he knows something that we don't know. So the American president needs to go back to the old school. If we have to, with the World Trade Organization, import and export beef and support one another, we need to support the country of label origin and let the Americans make a decision. When they go up to that grocery store and they see that garbage meat at Albertsons and it says a import from Argentina, and then right next to it you have Montana beef, let the people make the decision on what they're buying. You ever go and ask a restaurant when you sit down, "Hey, I want to order a steak, but where did it come from?" And I can guarantee you that the young kids these days and the waitresses and the waiters out there, a truck. A truck, that's where the beef comes from. So if I was your United States congressman, or if I was governor of the state of Montana, I would be reaching out to Troy Downing right now and say, Troy, your letter to the president is not newsworthy. You're not newsworthy as a congressman. You don't understand agriculture. You don't understand egg business. So stop trying to campaign for more votes because your letter was garbage. It's not going to work. Okay, you need a stronger United States congressman that actually is going to stand up and say, President Trump, it's not about quality. It's not about Argentina. We love Argentina. They do a great job on their beef, but we do better in the United States, and we have plenty of beef here. So, my fellow Montanans, remember this coming Sunday, November 1st, Saturday at 6 in the morning. Now, the lottery, the Montana Millionaire Lottery, starts at 5:30 in the morning selling tickets. But I was going to open at 5:30, but someone ruined it. I got a call from the state Montana Lottery because I've been handing out admission tickets because I wanted to sell Montana Millionaire tickets to only my customers. I thought it'd be fun and a great reward for my customers. But instead, someone that doesn't use Farm 406, and I can guarantee you it's a competitor, called the state lottery and they complained, well, it has to be open to the public. Well, it is open to the public, right? But every business owner has a right on who comes and goes on their premises. So to help control the crowd, I decided instead of opening up at 5:30, I would open at 6 a.m. So all those losers out there, instead of hurrying up and getting in line at 5:30, they can go stand in line at Town Pump or any of the other gas stations out there. And I'll enjoy a cup of coffee and get the 6 a.m. crowd. Not a bad idea, right? So I'm still going to take care of my customers. But anyway, this year everyone's like, "Wow, those tickets are going to go out fast." Well, they are going to move fast because last year they went through all the tickets and sold by 8:15 in the morning. But this year, the Montana Millionaire folks, they added another $1 million prize and they added another 120,000 tickets. So I bet these tickets won't sell out till about 9 a.m. Okay. And this is great because it's a Saturday morning. Farm 406 normally doesn't open up till 10 a.m. So we can honestly, all we're doing is focusing selling tickets from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. until they run out. So Farm 406 customers, you still get VIP access to your Montana Millionaire tickets at Farm 406. And your chance for me personally, I'm going to be running the lottery machine. So I will hopefully sell you. I shouldn't guarantee it, but I want to sell you one of those $1 million tickets. All right, so let's talk about the government shutdown. Okay, the government shutdown is a great thing. A great thing. I am completely 100% for our government being shut down. I wish we could shut down more of it because if you think about it, we need to shut down our state government. We need to shut down our local government. The spending in our national debt is out of control. And this goes back to calling out, people always forget after they elect people. What did the Republicans do 2 years ago when they were campaigning? The national debt is out of control. We're going to eliminate the national debt and pay it down. And that's our goal. And that's what we're going to do, folks. Our debt just passed $38 trillion. It is up, I believe that's $7 trillion before the beginning of the pandemic. That's 5 years ago. What the heck is going on with our government? Where does that money go? Why can't we pay that off? So shutting down our government, if they do it right, we could save money. But we can also realize long term, during a long term shutdown, what don't we need in our government? We're surviving just fine. I mean, we're like on day 25 here of government shutdown. I'm not feeling a pinch. I don't know of anybody else feeling a pinch. I don't see the economy slowing down. Now, you're going to argue with me because if you're an employee, you're probably like, well, I'm forced to work, but I don't get a paycheck. Well, no, 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 no. You will get a paycheck. It's just a very long pay period. So, you know, but maybe after the government opens back up, maybe they'll defund a bunch of these garbage entities out there, these bureaus that are out there, and restructure them so our national debt does not keep going up. So remember, but we need to hold, are we able as taxpayers to hold our elected officials accountable for, saying, hey, they're going to pay down the national debt and then they turn around and, almost, well, not double it, but trillions of dollars more later. Well, people are like, well, we can vote them out of office next go around. Well, that doesn't seem to happen. So maybe the government shutdown's a good thing. Now, I was kind of reading because there was the Montana farmers were complaining about not getting access to USDA and getting the payments they need for their ARC programs and da 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 da. And so President Trump last week, he authorized $3 billion to be released to the USDA so the farmers out there can get their subsidy payments. Now, this is a good thing, but people are probably wondering, it's like, why is or how can he do this when Congress is not open, Congress not appropriating funds? Well, it's interesting because the money for the USDA actually comes from the CCC, the civilian. Hold on a minute here. We got to look this up. I got to read it real quick because it actually comes from the CDC. It's the Commodity Credit Corporation. And this is an independent government agency. So it's kind of like the FDIC. But what they do is they borrow money from the Federal Reserve. So President Donald Trump authorized the CCC to borrow $3 billion from the Federal Reserve to help pay the subsidies out to the farmers out there. So that's great. We got payments now flowing back to the farmers out there for the subsidies. But here's the sad thing, folks. Why do our farmers out there have to be subsidized? They shouldn't. We should not have them at the mercy of the government. And that's what's been created. This goes back to the King's days where oh wait, I shouldn't say king because we just had the no king protest and I thought they were a bunch of idiots. But anyway, it goes back to the days of the kings where the kings kept everybody as peasants. They kept them broke. They kept them at the mercy of the king. And if the king wanted to shut things off, they had to come beg for help and forgiveness. Is that what we do in a modern society in America, where we keep all the farmers at the mercy of the government? Because if the government doesn't operate, the farmers are hurting. That's where we're at. So our next president, our next governor of the state of Montana needs to focus on eliminating the dependence upon our federal government. We need to improve our trade, which will improve our commodity prices so farmers can go out there and sell their product, be profitable without government assistance. That should be our goal. That should be part of the next farm bill if we can ever get Congress to do a farm bill. And that goes back to Troy Downing. Troy Downing is not pushing for a farm bill. If he really liked you farmers and ranchers out there, he'd be pushing for a farm bill and really advocating to get the garbage out because of all the subsidies that are in there. But actually, the farm bill could be restructured to where it leaves farmers independent of the government. So think about that, Mr. Troy Downing, if you want to win the next election, because I was looking out there too, and I see there's some younger guys that are coming out of the woodworks on the Democrat Party that are planning to run for Congress. And Zinke might be in trouble too, because he's kind of getting washed out as an old guy. So it might be interesting to see what happens next year in the congressional race. So let's see. So if let's go back to, so we're back to this national government shutdown. And so I always ask people, it's like, well, if you could shut down the government, what would you shut down and eliminate? I think across the board, we could defund and downsize most government departments and agencies. Think about the DEA. The DEA is planning to build a headquarters right here in Billings. So that means they're growing, right? And everyone's like, oh, the fentanyl crisis, the fentanyl crisis. And we'll talk about the fentanyl crisis later in the show on what Kyle Austin thinks about this whole fentanyl crisis. But anyway, the DEA wants to build a headquarters right here in Billings. And so they're talking growth, right? Folks, the DEA has failed Americans over and over and over again. Now, we like what they do, but they have failed. And this is why they have failed. The DEA has very broad discretion over drug enforcement across the United States, whether it's illegal or legal. Of course, chasing the illegals is hard work, right? So what the DEA has focused on is regulating your healthcare. The legal people out there, they have stricken the rules that it's hard for you to get the pain medication that you need to treat your pain. They have labeled every person that takes a painkiller as a criminal. In fact, they have pushed to create a registry. So every time a pharmacy dispenses a narcotic prescription drug to you, whether short term or long term, you go in their database. So they can track you just like an animal. They have restricted a lot of things. Now, some of it's for good. I would admit opioid and addiction is not a good thing, and we need to control it. But the problem is that's where the DEA has failed you before. They have studies and they knew what opioids and pain management was like. But however, they, instead of putting the foot down prior to it, they created the problem. And when they created the problem and it was time to backpedal, the FDA and the DEA did not take responsibility for it. In fact, they went out and started suing all the major manufacturers, all the major wholesalers, and said, all right, you guys did this. We're going to hold you accountable. No, wait. DEA, we followed the rules that you guys put in place. But instead, you want to go sue the American healthcare system. You want to go out and arrest the American healthcare system. You want to go out and pull licenses from the American healthcare system. Folks, we want a better healthcare system in the United States. We don't need more regulation and more government involvement, which prohibits you from getting access to your healthcare and prohibiting you from getting affordable healthcare. Think about that. Now, I know a lot of people probably don't care if they have to come show their darn ID when they pick up their prescription. Whoop-de-doo. But what if it's someone else that you're like, hey, I'm sick, I'm in pain, I got to send my granddaughter to go pick it up. And they're like, nope, you can't have it. See, that's where things go too far. You know, if we were at a state level, one of the government agencies right here in the state of Montana that is out of control is the Montana Department of Labor and Industry. Folks, it is a very big industry. It is a very big agency right here in the state of Montana, and it is ran by Commissioner Carrie Swanson. Now, some people out there think that she's doing a great job, and later in the show after the break, we're going to talk a little bit more about the Department of Labor Industry and the corruption and the garbage that's going in there that I can personally relate to right here at Farm 406. And we'll talk about that. And then right here in the city of Billings, the city planning division can go bye-bye. Folks, that has prohibited so many small businesses from building their dream business building, from expanding into Billings. No, the planning division needs to go bye-bye. The garbage that they do, the cost of construction, the willingness to do a remodel even. Folks, if you want to buy an older building to put your business in, you want to go do a remodel, the city planning division makes you go through 2 years and millions of dollars to do a remodel. That's garbage. Let's get back to the basics in our government so people can do business and people can work. That's what we have to do. So, my fellow Montanans, Farm 406 is Montana's vaccination destination. We are open 7 days a week, walk in, no appointments, and we offer the only in the nation get a brew, not the flu. With every flu shot, you get your choice of a free Mazevo coffee or a free beer at Canyon Creek Brewery right here in Billings, Montana. Now, it is also Medicare enrollment season, and Farm 406 has partnered with Wendy Nelson over at Ask Insurance. So as those Medicare rates go up and you're looking online and you're like, man, this is getting expensive. What can I find for me? I mean, you have an option of cutting your insurance. I mean, we're just not going to insure anymore. It's getting way too expensive. But go talk to Wendy Nelson at Ask Insurance before you cancel your insurance. Now, one of the things that you're going to find out there on the marketplace, which is corruption, is they will not list Farm 406 as a preferred pharmacy on those plans. And that is because the major corporations have bought up all those places. And so you'll just sit there and see all the W stores, all the C stores, all the A stores. And the list isn't long enough for you to get all the way to the bottom where you see the good old independents that are there to take care of you. So pick the plan that works best for you, but you can still use it at Farm 406. My fellow Montanans, this is Dr. Kyle Austin. We need to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Welcome back to My Fellow Montanans. You are listening to My Fellow Montanans. I am Dr. Kyle Austin, owner of Farm 406. And we had a pretty good, I think we had a pretty good first half of the show here. But those of you that are following us, if you missed the first half of the show, don't be afraid to follow My Fellow Montanans at youtube.com/My Fellow Montanans. And you can catch up on the old shows out there. But other than that, if you're following every Sunday at 7 o'clock, you can listen right here on KGHL or the 790 AM. If you want to be a guest on My Fellow Montanans, just reach out to me, Kyle at farm406.com, and we can get you in here. We can talk business, politics, health, anything you want to talk about that relates to us Montanans. All right, my fellow Montanans, let's dive right back into this. So Kyle Austin, that's me. I wrote a letter to Senator Daines and Governor Gianforte last week. I wrote a letter. Yep, just like Troy Downing writing a letter. But my letter is not garbage because we Montanans, we need to identify corruption. We need to expose corruption. And we need to put an end to government corruption. You know, we talk about term limits all the time between elected officials and why we want term limits to get the garbage out. The problem is our government is ran and the corruption lies with the officials and the executive directors that do not have term limits. This is involved with the Montana Department of Board of Labor. Those people have been there for years. They are running the government the way they see fit, not what the people see fit. They are pushing their agenda into the legislatures, passing more and more rules, more and more laws. So what do we need to do? We need term limits on our executive directors. We need term limits on our board members. The officials out there need to have term limits. You know, I keep bringing up the Chevron decision. I don't know if you guys remember, but the Chevron decision was brought up to where a government agency, a government inspector cannot interpret ambiguous laws in the courts. But yet we have these inspectors and these government people out there that are twisting the laws, the ambiguous laws. They're twisting it the way they want to, and they are coming after business owners, and they are coming after Montanans, and that is wrong. The laws need to be black and white. If the law is not black and white, the inspectors and the individuals in the government agencies should not be able to interpret how they want and should not be able to attack you. It distracts a business owner. It distracts an employee. It distracts and causes expenses with attorneys that are unnecessary. So a couple weeks ago, I ended the show, my fellow Montanans, talking about the government corruption involving with Farm 406. Because the Montana Board of Pharmacy has an inspector by the name of Mark Clawwitter. And Mark Clawwitter is a retired, he is a retired pharmacy manager from Osco out of Livingston, Montana. So he's been working for him for years. He's retired. He's collecting government, or not a government, he's collecting an Osco retirement fund, but yet he's inspecting the competitors. He is inspecting Farm 406 and nitpicking about this and nitpicking about that. And I just have to raise my eyebrow. Actually, I raise both eyebrows. I have to switch back and forth between one eyebrow and the other eyebrow because of the ridiculousness that comes out of Mark's mouth when he comes into my pharmacy. But anyway, Mark is inspecting the competitors of Osco. How would you like it if you owned a business and your competitor was allowed to come in and do your government inspection? Do you think that's right? Do you think that's fair? How is he treating Osco when he goes into all the Oscos? Anyway, one of the big things that, my letter to Senator Daines and Governor Gianforte was I brought up in the inspection report is that he marked me for not being compliant with the DSCSA under the FDA. And this is really interesting because the DSCSA, which stands for the Drug Supply Chain Security Act. All right, this is an act that was enacted in 2013 to enhance the security of prescription supply chain. It is to prevent the counterfeit, stolen, or harmful drugs from entering the supply chain. And so this act, it also involves the tracing, verification, and production, identifying those prescription drugs with the trading partners. And so it's a tracking program, folks. So it's to track your prescription drugs from the beginning to the end. Okay. So that's not a bad idea, right? I mean, we want to know where stuff comes from. We want to know that no one's tampered with it. I don't disagree with that. And the thing is, our federal government enacted this in 2013. All right. It did not go into effect for most suppliers until 2025. So, anyway, Mark comes in from the Board of Pharmacy. He's doing my inspection and he's, well, you're not compliant with the DSCSA. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Well, I'm marking you non-compliant. You're failed. I'm like, okay. So he leaves and, I'm like, no, I'm exempt. So I pull up the letter, the FDA letter that states that small business owners are listed as small business dispensers and they are exempt until November of 2026. Now, that is overreach of an inspector because the inspector does not know the laws himself. He is trying to enforce something, but because I'm exempt, he doesn't realize that. He doesn't know what he's doing. And so he's creating a huge havoc paperwork process for small businesses because now I have to prove I'm innocent and I have to now do all the paperwork and reply and say, nope, I am in compliance because I am exempt per the federal government. So you're probably asking yourself, all right, he's a state employee. Why is Kyle Austin writing a letter to Senator Steve Daines' office? That's federal. Well, here's the thing, folks, is the federal government pays the Montana or the states. They pay the states, like the Montana Department of Labor and Industry, to enforce federal rules and regulations. And so when Mark's going out there enforcing federal law, he is acting as a federal agent. And therefore, those federal agents have to comply with the same ethics as a federal employee. And so the federal government, the reason I wrote the letter to Senator Daines' office is because this involves the FDA, where now you have a state employee acting as a federal inspector, misinterpreting and misenforcing the federal laws. He should be held accountable for that. He should not even have brought it up. But it's because he doesn't know what he's doing, for one. And two, he's harassing me because he's still an employee of a competitor. And three, it's government overreach, folks. Think about that. That is what my letter identified. My letter identified the inspector's overreach and how he exposed, the corruption with it. I exposed it, and I asked to put an end to it. I did. I asked for his termination. I asked both Senator Daines' office and I asked for the Governor Gianforte's office to terminate the board inspector, Mark Clawwitter, because this is the garbage we need to end in the state of Montana and our entire United States. Remember, Farm 406 is Montana's vaccination destination, home of Get a Brew, Not the Flu, where you can walk in 7 days a week with no appointments. But guess what? You get your choice of a free beer at Canyon Creek Brewery or a free coffee at Mazevo. Farm 406 is Montana's prescription destination also, so don't forget you can take advantage of our free delivery service and get your prescriptions delivered at no additional charge. And if you are living out in one of those small rural communities around Montana, don't worry. We offer free mailing to you as well. So if farmers and ranchers out there, we can take care of your prescription needs as well. All right, so next on My Fellow Montanans is Governor Gianforte turns Democrat. That should be the headlines. The Gazette always fails at the headlines because they like to poke the bear on the Republicans, but I beat them to the punch on this one, so I get the headline. But maybe they'll put that on the next one. So Governor Gianforte turns Democrat, and just a second. So he appropriated $300 million to behavioral health in the state. And he even opened up Medicaid funding to help with addiction treatment. Now, Gianforte has never been for the people when it comes to healthcare. He's been against government funding for healthcare. He's been against addiction treatment programs. In fact, he just wants to lock people up and make them pets of society. So this really interests me. That's why I go back to the title, Governor Gianforte turns Democrat, because he actually does have a heart. Okay. And I like this. It's a good way of showing that he does flip-flop a little bit. It's just not the complete Republican one-way road. So good job, Governor Gianforte. So anyway, $300 million for behavioral health in the state. This is to go towards additional facilities and upgrades to the facilities. But is he trying to create more pets of society? That's what you have to ask, because is this money actually a hoax to where he's saying that it's going to behavioral health, but it's actually going to his prison system so he can have more prisons, more places to lock people up? Think about that. I would be very careful on how he words where that money's going, because it's misdirecting the taxpayer. You got to think, is addiction, folks, is it really a big problem? Yes, it is a big problem. But is the amount of money they're throwing out there and using overdose, actually they're using the term accidental overdose, and I want to talk about that in a little bit. But Montana has had 796 accidental overdose related deaths over the last 4 years. So that's 200 people in the state of Montana that has overdosed. Accidental overdose. Okay, we'll talk about that. So half of those 200 people are related to fentanyl. So that's only 100 people in the entire state of Montana that overdosed on fentanyl. Now, is that a big number? I want you to think about that. You always think like, yeah, one person dies, it's a big deal. It is. But when you look at a global picture and how much money they're spending and how much effort they're putting into these things, is 200 people a year worth it? Okay, in relation to everything else. So in comparison, an average of 200 people in the state of Montana die from highway fatalities each year. 200 people. So they're not shutting down the highways. They're not taking away the car keys of the idiot drivers out there. They are still letting people run around like crazy animals without driver's license. But the same amount of people die from highway fatalities in the state as compared to accidental overdose. So the last statistics out there was 2022. Okay, 2022, In the entire year, a total of 5,576 Montana residents died from all causes. So out of that, 200 people was accidental overdose. Not very many. Very small percentage, right? The number one cause of death in Montana is the same as everywhere in the United States, folks. Everywhere. The number one cause of death, which amounts to 22%, is heart disease and cancer. Now, with that being the number one cause, you don't see the governor and the government out there like, all right, heart disease is our number one cause, so we're going to eliminate fast food. We're going to eliminate XYZ that causes overweightness, and we're going to eliminate all the fat in people's diets. You don't see them doing that, do you? If you're out to really save a majority of lives, you're going to eliminate those things that are the biggest, the leaders of deaths in the United States. But what about cancer? You know, the causes of cancer. I mean, humans are living longer, and yes, that leads to more heart disease and more cancer related because you're getting up there in age when the body's getting tired. But you don't see them saying, well, all this cancer that's coming out there, we need to take away cell phones or computers, or we need to get rid of anything that you can say relates to cancer. You know, if you're Robert Kennedy and you want to make up some dream thing that Tylenol causes autism, so, but the thing is, why are we targeting and spending so much money when it's a small percentage of people when you go back to these accidental overdoses? Which leads me to the next big thing. If you're overdosing, why do they call all overdosing accidental? I mean, if you're an addict, you're abusing drugs, you're getting street drugs, you're choosing to take those drugs, you're choosing to take the doses that you take. Do you think it's really accidental? I don't think I would call it accidental. So the number two cause of death in Montana is chronic respiratory diseases. And this goes into a cool story that relates to vaccines because people out there have really bashed vaccines. But you look at all the vaccines, well, not all of them, but a majority of them are respiratory related. You got your flu shot, you got your RSV vaccine, you got your COVID vaccine, you got your pertussis vaccine, and you got your pneumonia vaccine. It's all to prevent chronic respiratory diseases and death. But people are bashing it over the political stuff of COVID. But folks, this is why people are getting in here and getting vaccinated, because with that being the second reason or cause of death in Montana, people, it scares them. They're like, nope, I want my preventative vaccine because I am high risk. Now it goes into the COVID vaccine. This is kind of a cool story that just came out because we've talked about how the mRNA was designed to cure cancer. But what they found in a study, and this was in a hospital, this is non-government, but what they found, and it doesn't matter if you get Pfizer, Moderna, but individuals with cancer that were undergoing cancer treatment, but they were also getting the mRNA COVID vaccine, survived twice as long as people that did not get the mRNA vaccine. Now that's cool stuff, right? That's cool stuff. And the reason behind it is your immune system. What they're saying is the mRNA vaccine, when those recipients received it, it triggered immune responses. And it helped the body fight off the cancer or delay the cancer to where it became an end result. That's the cool stuff. That's the stuff people need to know about is that, hey, folks, you got cancer and the likelihood of you surviving, but if you want to live longer, the COVID vaccine is actually doing cool things to help you survive longer. So if you have cancer out there, definitely talk to your doctor about getting the mRNA COVID vaccine probably every 6 months. If I had cancer, my thought would be I'd go in and try to get one every 3 months because if it boosts your immune system that much and puts it in hyperdrive, it could help delay the cancer and the inevitable and allow you to see your family that much longer. But anyway, let's go back to, is fentanyl really the problem here? Because we like to talk about the government ridiculousness. And like I pointed out, only 200 people a year die from accidental doses of narcotics and opioids. But is fentanyl really the problem here? Is this really what the government or Governor Gianforte is trying to do with this $300 million? And I don't think so. I think the Republicans have used the fentanyl crisis as a way to gain fear in people for their agenda. The question is, what is their agenda? That we really don't know. But the 300 million is probably to build the jail system and the prison system. That is probably more the end point of what they're trying to do. Remember, Farm 406 is Montana's vaccination destination. Get a brew, not the flu. With every flu shot you get at Farm 406, you get your choice of a free beer at Canyon Creek Brewery or a free coffee at Mazevo. Farm 406 is open 7 days a week. Walk in, no appointments. So Blue Cross Blue Shield is under investigation by the state auditor for a data breach for potentially exposing personal and medical information of thousands of Montanans. So the state auditor's office, James Brown, claims that Blue Cross Blue Shield has not been notifying affected customers or offering credit monitoring. And folks, I hate insurance companies, okay? Insurance companies are corrupt. But the part I don't like about this, and I'm not defending the insurance companies, okay? But the government BS needs to change when it comes to data breaches. Because you could have all the computer safeguards in the world, folks, but everything's connected via the internet, right? The people that make your safeguards are the same people that create the cyber attacks. They have the technology. So when our government says that Farm 406 has to have a firewall, they have to have password security, they have to have XYZ, and well, you're making me put all this money and effort into all this hardware, this software. I got to pay an IT guy. Now you look at all the hospitals, how much IT infrastructure they have to do to safeguard your personal health information. But the guys that write all this software, folks, to protect your personal health information are the same ones that can write the software to create cyber attacks. You get where I'm going with this? But our government is not going after the people that create the cyber attacks. It's because they don't know how to find them, or they don't want to try to find them. And that's where I'm going with this is the government goes after the healthcare entity for failing to protect your PHI because they are the easy target. They know who Blue Cross Blue Shield is, and so they're going to put all the blame on Blue Cross Blue Shield for the cyber attack or the leaking of the private health information. But they're not going to go after the cyber attacker because they don't want to invest the time. They're not an easy target, and that needs to change. You've seen this all along where, they go after the legal company, not the person committing the crime. So, I try to create a good analogy on this, and what I came up with is, you shouldn't have to lock your front door. But even when you do, if someone breaks in and you shoot that person that walks in your house, you are still guilty of murdering that person for not locking your front door. That's what the government's going to say. And you're probably like, no, if someone comes on my property, I have every right to shoot them. No, you don't. The government will make you the criminal. They will go after you because guess what? You're the easy target. And they're going to say that, well, that person broke through your front door or walked through your front door, but they didn't pose a serious threat to your person or family. So you're guilty of murder because you didn't lock your door, is what they're going to say. You didn't have an extra deadbolt. That's the ridiculousness of the government. And that's what goes back to this whole thing about protected health information. The government needs to go after the people that are actually committing the crime, not the easy target. My fellow Montanans, this is Dr. Kyle Lawson, owner of Farm 406. Don't forget that November 1st at 6 o'clock in the morning, Farm 406 will open its doors to sell Montana Millionaire tickets to Farm 406 customers. So Farm 406 customers, you get the benefit of not only Get a Brew, Not the Flu, and not only the best pharmacy services in the state of Montana, but you get access to the Montana Millionaire ticket without the long lines. My Fellow Montanans is a statewide weekly broadcast on topics ranging from business to agriculture and from health to politics and anything in between. You can follow us on youtube.com at My Fellow Montanans. You can listen at 94.7 FM or the mighty 790 AM, or listen live anywhere in the world at 790.com.